Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our panel. Did the internet kill the album review? I am Ryan Lynch. I'm the owner of Man Bites Dog Records, which is a indie hip-hop label in Washington, D.C. With us today, our panel is made up, we'll start at the end. Myke Seatown.
Oh, you guys are so sweet.
We have Anthony Fontano. And Daniel Gill. Thank you very much. Is most everybody here tonight, are you guys all artists? Musicians?
Writers. Yeah,
writers, bloggers. You can speak up, it's okay.
Just really big music fans. Just like...
All right.
So is this, okay. How many people have been to South by before? Raise your hands. Okay, so we got veterans here, huh? Okay, so let's go ahead and start. So Myke is from Atlanta-based YouTube channel, Dead End Hip Hop. Myke is actually a renegade vegan with a flair for death metal, punk rock, and hip hop. He's always outspoken when it comes to his passion for music. Daniel Gill is the president and founder of Forcefield PR, a Highland Park boutique-based firm with a passion for helping clients promote their music, book, film, and their upcoming tours. Anthony Fontano, who is best known by the title, The Internet's Busiest Music Nerd, is the founder and the runner of The Needle Drop, a blog site created in 2007 for reviewing music. In 2009, Anthony started doing vlogs on the site, and the site has grown to over 250,000 subscribers with over 36 million views. Is that right?
Wow.
So, that's pretty impressive. We're just going to get into it right away. We're going with the first question. What is the real benefit for an artist to have their album reviewed these days?
I mean, I think, the premise that at least Myke and I function under is that by doing the album review, or at least, positive album review of a record that we enjoy, that we're somehow going to be turning someone who views the video who may not have heard of the artist otherwise onto it, and then they go on to listen to the record, they go on to love it, maybe they go on to dig into that artist's back catalog or anticipate every album that they put out into the future, maybe spend money on that artist's merchandise or their music and go out to their shows and just sort of help create a livelihood for the artist that we want to continue to see art from.
Yeah, and the way I look at it is, we were discussing this a few minutes ago, is the reason I like to review albums is because I want to be able to give my opinion to the artist themselves. They might play a show, a random fan might run up, they're not going to give them a critique. They're not going to say, hey man, I liked your last album, but I felt like you could have done this, and this better, and it may have made for a better listen. I always listen to an album and review an album and think to myself, if I had this artist's ear for 10 minutes, open-minded, what would I like to tell him? So it's more so for me to, I guess it's selfish, because I tell him what I like and don't like, so he'll continue to give me good music. And the ones that are bad, it helps me too, because I don't have to hear it anymore.
I think it's important to consider, we're talking about the issue of the internet, and I think Spotify and the access to just like basically almost every album ever recorded at your fingertips anytime is a little overwhelming for some people, and for me, kind of like, because I'm, when I was growing up in high school, first getting into music, it was pre-internet, so I would actually read reviews and go buy the record not having any idea what I was getting myself into, other than that I knew that Spin really liked this record or whatever. So for me, it was always, that was kind of how I got into, and a lot of times the stuff that they were giving like 9 out of 10 to turned out to be really good and kind of shaped my taste. So now that you have access to hear everything before you buy it, or basically you could hear anything ever recorded for free, reviews kind of guide you and help you kind of like cut down on the clutter of having access to everything, and narrow your focus a little bit of like what should I actually be listening to?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like without even, and this is sort of the beauty of, you know, the whole supply and demand dichotomy. If there's still demand for something, we don't need to wonder why there's demand for it. All we know is that there's demand for it. And I think without even thinking about it, the purpose that album reviews serve now has changed since you know, when Daniel was talking about being turned on to records. I mean, initially it was because, I mean, back in the day, in order to hear a record, you had to pay money. Now listening to a record is free. Owning the record is what costs money. But now listening to it is absolutely free.
So do you think that, and takes us to our next question, do you think that album reviews are going to need to change their delivery of the message in order to stay relevant in the future?
I mean, in a sense, I feel like in a way now, they're still functioning in the fact that they're not helping people decide whether or not they should buy that record from that band that they're already really familiar with. At least not all the time. They're helping people, like Daniel said, sift through or sort of get recommendations out of the hundreds of records that are coming out every month, you know, or thousands in some cases.
I agree, but at the same time, I think that one thing that album reviews do is they keep the music dialogue going. You know, if you didn't have music reviewers or critics that are out there and constantly talking about music, you know, look at jazz, you know, look at classical music, look at any of these other genres that don't get discussed anymore. You know, how many people in here have like a top 5 favorite jazz album of the last 2 years? One person.
You go, girl.
Yes, do your thing. Oh, so you're cheating. You're cheating. You don't count. So I'm going back to 0.
Was it Kenny G?
Yeah, Kenny G does not count. I'm sorry.
John Cash.
I think that's a really good point.
Well, thank you.
Well, I mean, to answer the question specifically, do album reviews need to change their delivery in order to continue to be functional?
Relevant.
I mean, I think they at least should be conscious of the fact that listeners are going into the music world, some of them anyway, bombarded with all of these albums that they could potentially be listening to. And some people, you know, at least when it comes to the more obscure stuff, or the stuff that they're not hearing about necessarily, might need someone to guide them through that or recommend them something that may not be getting a ton of press or may not be on a label that can provide them a huge advertising budget and just sort of throw it in your face at every corner that you turn. You know, the artists like that, sort of in my head, are the ones that I in my own perfect world, I would love to sort of have driving traffic on review sites, but unfortunately, you know, they're not. And you know, it's sort of understandable. I mean, people don't know who they are, so they're obviously not going to be searching for them in a Google search.
Sure.
But I feel like into the future, possibly as people realize that, well, I don't need to necessarily go on a website to find an opinion about a record that I've already listened to, they might instead realize that, but I might need someone to tell me what records out of these hundreds I haven't listened to are actually worth checking out.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. You know, when I was a kid, the way I found new bands and new artists or whatever was by looking in the back and reading through the credits and seeing who that particular artist thanked. You know, so I guess that's kind of the same thing for people that might watch us on a regular basis. They might want to say, well, you know, what's Fantano listening to now? Oh, he liked this album. He gave this album an 8. I'm gonna go check it out. Or what does Myke Seatown give a good review for this month? I'm gonna go check that out just because they said that it's a good album.
And you know, sometimes like not some people don't even wait to hear my opinion. They'll go straight to my Last FM profile and just like see what I'm listening to over there, and then just go like right and go listen to it right away. You know, I mean, I feel like into the future, album reviews or just people who are supposed to be tastemakers in general might benefit, and their viewers, their viewers, their readers, their listeners, whoever their audience may be, might benefit more from just, you know, them going for more of like an endorsement model. Like, I endorse this artist. This is my favorite artist of the entire month. This is my favorite album of the month.
It's interesting you bring up the word tastemaker. Do you guys consider yourself tastemakers in the way you choose reviews?
I mean, I feel like in some regard I have to, because even though I do give in to what people ask me to review, because I feel that I owe my audience that, because they are curious about what my opinion is on particular things. I mean, there are records as well that they're not asking me about, that I don't want to say I shove down their throat, because I don't. I mean, some people are legitimately interested in what I think of things that they might not have heard of. I mean, I just reviewed this crazy noise rock record from this New York band called White Suns, and I absolutely loved it. And I loved their last record as well, but I mean, you know, still, even this time around, people weren't like, hey, what do you think of the new White Suns, or something like that. You know, it's like this completely abrasive, ugly record that, you know, I've just been like dying to hear your opinion on, but, you know, but instead, you know, I'm just sort of referring them to these artists that, that they're not necessarily hearing about. You know, and there are artists as well, like, this one rapper from Wisconsin, Milo, you know, who, through a review I had done of a mixtape that nobody had heard of up until that point, you know, after he like emailed it to me, you know, he ended up linking up with a bunch of other underground rappers that he really loved, and now he tours with those guys, and he's about to go over to LA to be with those guys and make music with them all the time. You know, I consider myself a tastemaker, and I think it's important to sort of endorse stuff that, you know, is outside of what people are widely anticipating, in order to, you know, kind of put some shine on something that you think is really worthwhile.
I feel like we'd be failing if we weren't actually trying to spread music around and tell you guys, you know, what we think is awesome. You know, I remember, do I consider myself a tastemaker, to answer your question? I'm not really sure, maybe, but there have been artists like one of my all-time favorite rappers, Brother Ali. He posted on Twitter once, he said, how did you guys find out about my music? And there was like 3 different people that retweeted him back and put Myke C-Town. And I was like, oh my God. And he actually wrote me and was like, man, this is why I love you, man. I love you. I love the fact that you do what you do, brother. You know what I'm saying? If you guys know Brother Ali, you get what I'm saying. So am I a tastemaker? I don't know, but am I doing my job to spread the music that I love? Yes.
I mean, it's really difficult to, I mean, I feel like, you know, if you're going to be successful, at least right now, being a reviewer, it's kind of difficult to be a tastemaker 100% of the time, at least in my head, because I think tastemaking is kind of a very specific hat that you can wear. Because, I mean, when I review the new Kanye record, do I feel like I'm tastemaking? No. You know, I mean, I feel like I'm reviewing a really popular record that everybody already knows about, that my audience is curious about what my thoughts on are. But, I mean, when I originally started the Needle Drop, I sort of convinced myself that the only way this was going to work is if I only reviewed the most obscure band and artist that I ever found and came across. I don't want anything that anybody's ever heard before. And, you know, that's why, like, the first year of me doing this was, like, incredibly fruitless. And, you know, it wasn't until after reviewing more popular stuff and sort of, you know, forcing myself to, because there are popular artists that I like, but I figured that if I was going to do this Needle Drop thing, I was only going to review the obscure stuff and not talk about the popular bands that I like. But, you know, through just interacting with my audience, you know, because I've always had a personal connection with the people who watch my videos, you know, and telling them what I do like that is popular, you know, they're like, come on, why don't you review this record? We already know you like the band. Yeah. So, you know, just gave in and started reviewing more popular artists, and then sort of realized that through reviewing more popular records, you know, here and there, or like at least one a week or one every other week, you bring in new audience that you can then turn on to the smaller artists.
Yes.
You know, which, I mean, on the surface it may seem counterintuitive reviewing popular artists to get people to check out smaller artists, but I mean, at least in my experience, it works.
It definitely works.
I don't know if this was one of our main questions, but we had been talking a little bit earlier about, are certain artists now critic proof because of the internet? Mm-hmm. And you know, like, that can be looked at in 2 different ways. Really popular artists like Jay-Z or somebody like that clearly is kind of beyond the point of, it doesn't really matter at this point what a reviewer says about him, because he's going to be Jay-Z and sell 1 million records and do his Samsung deals or whatever. Like, so he's kind of at the point, I think he's been for a while at the point of being critic proof. And then there's also smaller artists who have come up in the internet age, like Lil B or Tyler, Odd Future, and things like that, who are kind of critic proof because they have their own popularity and their fan base on lockdown, purely through the internet and came up that way, and their fans are so dedicated to them that what a critic says is not going to matter, and not going to affect their record sales or their concert attendance or anything like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think we were having this conversation, but it sort of dawned on me now that I feel like what we need to define is what critic proof actually means. Like in the case of Jay-Z specifically, like obviously, if Myke C-Town gives Jay-Z a negative review, like it's not like he lost a couple mil, you know, like out of the process of that happening. But I don't feel like Jay-Z is bulletproof when it comes to the general consensus of the hip-hop community. I mean, you know, most people after Magna Carta Holy Grail are kind of under the opinion that, I mean, Jay-Z's newer records aren't as good as, you know, his huge classics like Blueprint,
Of course.
you know, and I feel like that's sort of an opinion that the community has slowly come to over the course of numerous Jay-Z records since the release of that album. But the thing is, that's also something that the hip-hop community, while it may have that opinion, something, at least in my experience reviewing numerous genres, the hip-hop community openly embraces the idea of just like open debate on what artists are better and what albums better, and you know what records right now are actually worthwhile. You know, because there are a lot of indie pop records and indie rock records and even punk records that I think listeners would much rather just kind of take a more individualist stance, listen to the record. If they enjoy it, they enjoy it. But, you know, at least in my experience with hip hop records, it's more about like the open community debate of that album and sort of, you know, what it means to the genre as a culture.
Yeah, but at the same time, I do understand what Daniel's saying, because it's more one of those things where if you do review a Jay-Z album, I do almost feel like he's critic proof, only because when you do say that it's bad, it doesn't really make a difference, because, you know, even the people that agree with you, they'll say, yeah, it's not that good, but it's still Jay-Z.
Yeah.
It's still Jay-Z, but it's Jay-Z. Anthony, it's Jay-Z.
Well, I mean, I think that's the difference between being a fan, you know, and just being like a critical music listener. And I feel like there's a point at which some artists get so popular that they amass so many fans. And in my opinion, a fan is somebody who follows an artist do or die, you know, and as long as you're in that mindset, you continue to be a fan. You know, some people fall in and out of fandom, and that's fine. But as long as you're a fan who's going to follow that artist, you know, no matter where they go, and I'm a fan of some artists, you know, no matter how much a particular artist may disappoint me and I don't like their new record, I'm still looking forward to whatever their next thing is, you know. And like I said, some artists are able to amass so many fans that they're insulated in a sense, that they're going to support them no matter what, just out of hope or sort of anticipation that whatever they do next, you know, will make them happy, or just sort of seeing them in the limelight and just knowing that they're there and still creating, you know, makes them happy as well. So I mean, you know, in a sense, like, can critics change that? You know, can they create change in the sense that they can give an artist less fans? I mean, I feel like we only have power to do that sort of in the introductory state. You know, like somebody may or may not check somebody out based upon your or my recommendation.
They're not going to stop liking them because you don't like them.
Exactly. You know, like for example, I mean, the artist Milo that I, you know, just mentioned, like, I loved his first mixtape, but I ended up not liking the EP that he followed that up with instantly. So there were all these people who I had turned on to him, and they turned around on me and were like, what do you mean you don't like it? You know? Like, I turned you on to this.
And you're now a traitor.
Now I'm just like, I don't know if I like this now, you know? But they're like, what?
But I think that also brings up another important point that I think we should talk about, which is like being honest in reviews. And having like the ability to dish out a negative review when it is warranted. And like, oh, can I read my quote now? I wrote down a quote from one of my favorite music critics. The critic is Simon Reynolds, and he said, "What I find disconcerting is how many young writers are very reasonable and sane in their approach, and overly fair-minded. It's not what I'd want to read at all. I'd much rather read a very fierce denunciation of something, even if it was attacking something musically dear to my heart."
That's a good question. Do you guys like to read bad reviews?